And it's going to happen a lot. Plane crashes are going to be happening all the time in our lives. Even though there is a way for the federal government to institute a technical change that would make every jet plane completely safe. And scientists have known this for a long time. The way you can eliminate all risk on jets is you remove those big side portions, the wings. And then they can't get up to 35,000 feet in the first place. But then they're just big fat trains moving around the airport, and nobody wants that. My point is, we can't have it both ways. And Americans have an exceptionally odd way of, sometimes convenient way, of denying risk when they want to. Believe me, denial is not just a river in Africa. It's right here in America. We deny risk, we deny fear, we deny resolution. We've got, for example, in this country, 25,000 suicide prevention centers and not one homicide prevention center. We drink and drive without seatbelts and light up another cigarette and then cancel the trip to Europe on the 1 in a million chance of a terrorist attack. In fact, there are Americans who will never go to see the pyramids for fear of being killed in Egypt. So they stay in Detroit, where the risk is 20 times greater. In that poll of things we fear, 16% of Americans fear electromagnetic fields. 30% fear foreign viruses. I actually met a woman with that fear, by the way. Of course, I met her in a TV news studio where they were thrilled to have her because it was a segment on a lethal new disease coming over from Europe that was virtually certain to kill us all before the end of Sweeps Week. And it was a scary-sounding, hard-to-ignore, got-to-see-this, honey, get in here, made-for-TV kind of disease. And as you probably already guessed, it was the flesh-eating disease. Now, lacking anybody who had that, they found a woman who was afraid she had it. And there was a small town. So I was introduced to her in the hallway, shook hands with her, chatted for a moment, and then I watched her go off to do her interview. And it crossed my mind as I was watching her interview about the terrors of this flesh-eating disease that she could have told me all this before shaking my hand. But no matter, she didn't have it, I didn't get it, and neither will you. And whenever I think about the flesh-eating disease, which is not that often, thankfully, I hear the words of the television news producer that day who told me a little worry never hurt anybody. And I thought about it and realized that, in fact, anxiety kills more Americans each year than all the foreign viruses, all the electromagnetic fields, all the airplane crashes, and all the blown-up buildings put together, through heart disease, through blood pressure, through addiction, through depression, and all the other stress-related ailments that are so much a part of our lives today. And with all the risk and danger that they bark at us from the local news, they should just begin the program honestly each night. They should say, "Welcome to the Channel 2 News. We're surprised you made it through another day. And here's what happened to those who didn't." And then they give us the death litany. Now, one result of all this is that 90% of Americans feel less safe today than they did growing up. But let's look at that safer world of our youth. For most of us, it was a world without airbags, without mandatory seatbelts, without the reduction in smoking, without early detection of cancer, without 911 systems that tell emergency responders exactly where you are when you're in need. You remember those oh-so-safe 60s when world powers plotted nuclear war against each other, and school children practiced regular air raid drills. I remember, balled up under the desk at 6 years old, listening intently for the whistle of some incoming missile. Those were the safe days, weren't they? But of course, it's personal violence, not nuclear violence, that we most fear today. And admittedly, the violence we all see in the media is far more gruesome than it was when we were young, and far more dramatic. But that is my point, the violence we see. In the satellite age, we don't just get the calamities in our own lives. We get the calamities in everyone's life. And we experience everyone's pain, and we experience all the terror and all the fear. So Americans undoubtedly have a far larger index of things to be afraid of. No question about that. 18% of Americans are afraid of being a victim of mass violence, like at Oklahoma City. Now, let me start smaller than mass violence, and we'll work our way up. Just start with airports, for example. We all agree they should be weapons-free environments. Metal detector screening makes sense. Courthouses should be weapons-free, right? High schools, obviously. Federal buildings, can't have people running around in there with guns. And so it sort of makes you wonder, if we all agree that those places should be weapons-free, what places should not be weapons-free? Just the places in between and we scurry around? Of course, that's a question for a different conference. But let me be clear about something. I really favor and believe in the precaution of metal detector screening, because unlike the specter of bombs at federal buildings in America, handgun violence is not at all rare. So why isn't there weapons screening at more locations? This came up during one of the questions today, and the answer is kind of interesting. When you look at society at large, the reason there isn't weapons screening at more locations is because only government is willing to pay for it. When's the last time you saw a private building that used metal detectors to create a weapons-free environment? It's very rare. Courthouses? Yes. Lawyers' office buildings? No. Schools? Absolutely. Private schools? Absolutely not. After the World Trade Center bombing, you didn't see every office building in America installing X-ray and E-scan systems at $70,000 apiece. Why not? Because it's unsound business. It's unsound business to spend $1 billion to save $1 million, maybe. Or to spend billions to save millions, maybe. But take money and design out of the equation for a moment, because there's the obvious, much more important fact about lives being at stake. Well, lives are always at stake in government decisions. Airbags save lots of people and take a few others who wouldn't die in the absence of airbags. Increase the police patrols over here, and you don't have them over there. More people have died driving to federal buildings than have died at federal buildings. So lives will always be at stake, but the quality of lives is also at stake. And unwarranted fear is reducing the quality of our lives. When we spend all the money to make all the federal buildings in America resistant to all the mad bombers who aren't coming, we will not be less afraid. And when we design the buildings around very rare incidents that have come and gone, there's another hard truth to consider, as the gentlemen who talked to us today work with every day, and that is that the terrorists' imagination about what to do begins where the security expert's imagination and budget ends. He stands across the street, the terrorist, and looks at his options. The windows are bulletproof. By the way, those are not windows. Those are called lights, as you architects know. Windows let in air and light. These things that don't open anymore are just called lights.